I'm really excited to share the Descript tutorial with you today because this is the most impactful piece of software I think I found all year. I've waited to make this tutorial because they've gone through a lot of changes. They've got this classic version of Descript and then this storyboard version where they're trying to make it a little bit more advanced to compete with softwares like Adobe Premiere Pro and Final Cut. Descript is a game changer because it actually allows you to treat it like a document, just like you're editing a Google Doc. So as you are cutting words and things like that out of the picture, it is actually making those cuts in video and to the audio and removing those pieces altogether. If you are somebody who's really meticulous and you like to see, the ums and uhs and all the filler words, the knows removed completely out of the picture, and you don't like more than, let's say, a point 5-second gap between words, you can actually set that, and that will automatically make cuts throughout your entire recording. So the context that I want to share this with you as I'm kind of going through the tutorial is giving you a complete beginner's guide into what Descript looks like. I'm going to be focusing on their storyboard version because that's the future. They are eventually going to get rid of the classic Descript. So let's keep our focus on learning the storyboard, even though it looks a little bit more complex than the classic. I'm going to be covering aspects in this video that you're going to run into as you're actually using the software. So let's say you record a podcast on Zoom and you want to drag and drop those files into Descript to make a video version or just an audio version. I'm going to go over what that process looks like. I'm also going to show you what it's like to edit clips as you are editing your podcast. So putting away clips that you can publish on YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, TikTok, LinkedIn, wherever you really want. We'll cover some of the common elements that you might want to add, like emojis and subtitles with creative captions, along with some B-roll and GIFs if you want to get a little bit fancy. The reason I'm so excited to share this with you is because if tech and software has been a limiter for you before, or maybe the finances to hire a video editor like me, then Descript is the perfect software for you. Now, if you do this for a living, part-time or full-time, you will find that there are limitations with Descript, even with their newer storyboard version. And so I think coupling that with Premiere Pro, if you have the budget, is pretty helpful. One client, Blake, likes to say that he has trouble even opening up a laptop. And so Descript is something that, he was holding off on his podcast for probably a year and a half. And Descript was the software that allowed him to actually learn this and get it out in probably, an hour per episode that he was actually editing. And he had no real tech ability before. So there's plenty of people that I've taught this software to, and I wanted to make this video to make it a little bit more accessible than just the one-on-one sessions where I'm teaching this. I'm going to show you what my screen looks like as I'm kind of opening up and working with this software. As I open up Descript, the first advantage that I notice is how you can share and collaborate with others. As you upload and work on files inside of Descript, it's going to automatically back up your edits. So there's no need to share your source files the way you would have to in something like Adobe Premiere Pro. And if you were missing even a single image, that wouldn't really show up when you are opening up your timeline, versus everything inside of Descript that you make an edit on. If a co-host or a teammate is logging on and taking a look at that, they're not going to have any issues at all continuing your edits or exporting out that video. Okay, now here's an example of what your main homepage will look like once you open up Descript, all of the projects you might have been working on or screen recordings and things of that nature. You have the option to hit new classic project, which I really used to love, but honestly, hitting new project is what's going to open up their new updated storyboard version, which is really the future and what I recommend investing your time and actually learning. So that's what I'm going to be using for the tutorial today. Now, as you can see, it looks pretty simple. The way you would typically start this is whatever the interview is or the video file that you want to drag into the timeline, you can go ahead and do that. So I'm going to drag this Floyd Mayweather interview. It's kind of short, which is why I'm also choosing this. It's like 4 minutes, so it will transcribe relatively quickly. You can also, as you can see, select. Okay, there's 2 different speakers here. Awesome. That's Floyd Mayweather. Okay, and this is Brian J. Roberts. Perfect. So as you can see, that was super fast. And while we were actually doing that, all of the interview has actually been transcribed. So wasn't that actually super fast? And it looks so beautiful because it's color coded. So the speakers are separated as you are scrolling down. You can quickly identify. But your timeline here, sometimes this is annoying. If you want it to be a little bit bigger, you're going to make the video smaller, but as you drag this over, it expands your video, and you can kind of scroll through here. So first example that I'm going to show you. Now, I'm going to familiarize you with the workspace. So on your left-hand side, as you see, is the text. So if I click anywhere onto here, it's actually jumping onto the timeline at the 26-second mark is where he says, I'm blessed, right? If I scroll down and I go, when's Brian talk next? Okay, I'm going to hit excited, and it jumps to the 3-minute and 45-second mark. Isn't that amazing? And so now at the bottom, as you can already see here, is the timeline. This is the main workspace. So if I was going to be adding other images or music and things of that nature, I would actually drag and drop that into the timeline here. But you can make cuts actually anywhere. So it really depends on what you're used to and where you like to work. Since this is a little bit podcast focused, I want to show you the audio effects. Once I highlight the clip in the timeline, if I want to increase the sound or anything like that, I can do that over here. I can also add audio effects. Audio repair is something that's kind of like an, auto improvement feature. So if you hit studio sound, it kind of goes through your entire track and it improves the sound automatically. The next thing that you can do is you could add some dynamics and some EQ. This is something that I like to add typically in Premiere Pro when I would have exported it after, or I would have already applied those effects in that software. But you can mess around with all these effects in here and listen to those differences. The way that you would listen to those differences and the best way to learn some of these audio effects and what they do is by actually, removing it just like that, giving it a listen, and then hit Command Z, and then you bring that feature back. You can also mess around with the intensity of how some of this stuff is applied. Now, I'm going to actually remove the next section I want to go over is this top area over here. So I'm going to hover over this media section. If you tap this, you're basically going to get access to a bunch of images, a bunch of video, a bunch of GIFs, which is really, really awesome. A lot of this stuff, if you want to just drag and drop into your timeline, it's basically just that easy. Next up, if you wanted to actually record something directly into Descript, you can do that. So if you're somebody who's recording a solo podcast, or you're recording an intro or a trailer or a sponsor read, and you need a recorder to do so that's not exactly Zoom, you could actually record that stuff directly in Descript. I'm not going to hit that because that's going to interrupt my screen recording, which, by the way, I am using Descript to record my screen instead of Loom, which I think is pretty awesome. You get that bundled in when you get Descript. Now, this is probably my favorite feature right here is if you hover over text, you can add a title, you could do plain text, but really the feature I like is if you hit Captions. Now, what Captions does is it takes everything that's in your composition over here and it turns that into an actual caption. So as you see, I hover over different parts and the caption is already made. I can obviously make this smaller, let's say. So if you wanted to show just, one word at a time and you want it to flash really quick, if I play that now, you can do that. This is now a layer on top of the existing track. So if I zoom in or if I just click onto that, it allows me to edit that in my right side panel over here. One of my favorite sections to actually customize is going to be the font. Now, you might not see all of the different areas. There's not a lot of built-in options here. So what you have to do is download a custom font. You can typically do that on Google. I did that with the bold font, and then you would hit add fonts to Drive. You could either browse Google Fonts or you could drag and drop the file in here. And then it basically uploads that and saves it in your workspace. I'll show you what it actually looks like if I hit the bold font. As you can see, if I hit play, isn't that kind of cool? Now, I do want to customize this a little bit further. So something I'm going to edit will be the border, or in some softwares, this is called the stroke. So if I hit plus, it's automatically 10. You can see this black outline that's kind of appeared. I'm going to, exaggerate it to be, let's say 20. Okay, it's a little bit thicker, or 25. Boom. I like that. I'm going to keep that. If I want, I can add effects. So I come over here and do shadow. And now, as you can see, there's this radiant gray transparent shadow here. That's pretty cool. Another thing that you can do is mess around with the actual live text options. So if you hit this next to captions over here, you're basically going to see the classic. You can highlight the active word if you wanted. So this actually helps if if I made this bigger, like that. So now let's play. So you can mess around with the different options for caption settings, but the next area that I want to highlight is this section over here, which is templates. The second that I hit templates, I can basically either create my own, or for, let's say, title slides, I can see fading titles, I can see slide effects, I can see intros. There's a lot of cool options here if you want to actually mess around and take advantage of them. You've got the annotations, you've got, these little circle effects if you wanted to do that, while you're pointing to the screen. If I wanted to do that, I could, which is kind of cool. Under the template section, the multicam area is probably the most useful, where you've got the different settings in a podcast where you would actually set up for remote settings, maybe a 2-screen setup, or this one I like, which is a picture-in-picture. You can see both people in the screen, but the focus is on one speaker. If you hit audiograms, if you don't have access to video, but you have some audio, and you want to make some shareable clips. The next area that I'm going to dive into is these 3 buttons right up here. This one obviously is going to allow you to search the entire document and video. This button right over here is going to allow you to shorten word gaps, which is really cool. If I hit shorten word gaps and I want to bring this down to, let's say, 1.2 seconds, anything that is longer than 1.2 seconds, it would make a cut there. It would shorten the gap, and you would see cuts on the timeline once I do that. I've gone down to as low as 0.5 seconds for faster paced videos to eliminate that completely. So let's say you're filming something where there's a lot of bad takes, or you take long pauses between different takes for maybe YouTubers. It can be a great option for you to cut out all of that fat very, very quickly. Now that I've started, let me actually demonstrate what it looks like. So you hit shorten word gaps. Let's say I was to bring it down to 1.2. So as you can see, there are 7 instances that it's showing where you actually have that. If I want to apply it to all, I would hit apply to all. And now all of a sudden in the timeline, it's made cuts at all of the different portions and tightened all of that up a little bit. Isn't that kind of cool? Next up is removing filler words. This is very valuable. If I hit remove filler words, automatically I can see there are 45 instances in a 4-minute video where you've got ums, us, but I guess, I mean, I suppose. You can check and uncheck some of this stuff, and you can even add your own custom words to detect. You can either go through this stuff individually, because as you know, there are some cases where it is totally normal for you to say, and that space is actually impactful, and you may not want a cut there. But then there's a lot of other instances like ums and words that you repeat twice. Those things, this will actually detect, and you can basically hit apply to all. It's selected under, remove media at the moment. So I'm going to hit apply all. Okay, so hitting these three dots up top over here, what you can do is change the orientation of what you're working on. So if you wanted portrait for basically shorts and reels and TikTok, you could do that. You wanted square, or you want to make your own custom, you can do that. Right now, I was just messing around with actually, what the vertical one would look like. And so as you can see in the timeline over here, I can cut back and forth as the speakers are going back and forth there. But one of the things that's going to be really important in the text editor will be removing actual chunks of media that you actually don't need. So let's just say, one of these parts was not as interesting. Like this is an actual, I could just say, boom, I want to delete this whole chunk, right? Better yet, I want to delete, all of this over here. Boom. So it's just him talking right there. You don't really need to worry about the correct spelling and all of that stuff unless you are actually going to make clips. If you are using this for a full episode, chances are you're not really using that many captions in there. You might use text styles and things like that. But when you start editing clips out of this stuff and you want to actually get the spelling right, you would make sure that all of this stuff is pretty perfect. And then, once you have the captions track, you would go ahead and edit that stuff there. As you are watching your full episode, and let's say you're like, oh, okay, 2 minutes in, or 1 minute in, right here is where I want to make, a clip. I'm going to hit the M button, and that makes a marker. So when I hit the M button, I've created a marker where I can actually say, okay, talking about dad, right? So now I've made this marker where I can come back to it later when I want to actually do something with it. And let's just say that I found the perfect moment, the perfect clip, and maybe it's 15 seconds, right? So I'm going to drag this right here. Okay, it's just, for example, this section, and I'm basically going to hit these three dots, and I'm going to hit duplicate to new composition. So now a new composition has been created. It's been created as clips from Floyd Mayweather interview. So I tap that. As you can see, it keeps the landscape version that I was working with. So if I want to go back to, let's say, landscape, I could do that. If I wanted to, work on square, boom, it changes it to that. Now, what's really amazing about this is if you are doing this for audio podcasts, the actual transitions for audio doesn't sound super jumpy. It's pretty good. When you are watching the video version, if you've made too many cuts and you've shortened too many word gaps, that stuff is sensitive and you will be able to see that. So just be watchful in terms of how much you utilize those features. Those are some things to actually watch out for. But as you can see, this was fairly quick. Let's say when I'm ready to actually publish and export this out, I'm going to hit publish, come over to export. And if I want to export the audio version, which I typically like to do first, I'm going to go ahead and do audio. In the settings, you make sure current composition is highlighted. In quality, I like to export out in WAV, but you can typically do that in MP3 since a lot more providers, it's just a little bit more common. So let's say I want to keep it MP3, add metadata. I would go ahead and hit export. Go ahead. I'm going to add test to this so I know. And then it now starts exporting. As you can see, this is very, very quick exporting this out, and it's already done. Now I do have a fast laptop right now, which makes a difference. But for the video version, this is going to take a little bit longer, especially when you're working with 30 minutes, 60 minutes of footage. So I want to come over to video. I'm going to hit settings. Depending on what the composition was actually filmed in, that's what it is matched to, but you can always change that if you need to 4K, if you filmed in 4K. And then basically I would go ahead and hit export the same way. I'm going to hit test. Oh, okay. And now, as you can see, it's actually exporting it. What's cool is it lets you work on other stuff while you are actually exporting, which is kind of nice. Now, this is the one downside I will share with you about Descript is sometimes if you have slow internet or a computer that is really old, adding too many effects and making a lot of changes, it's going to be very slow, and exporting it is going to take a little bit of time. You can thankfully work on other things while this stuff is exporting, but just know that it takes a little bit of time because everything is, web-based for the most part. Now, the final section that I'm going to leave you with, which I found to be extremely helpful, is actually their support center. So when you hit help and you hit contact us, you can actually, during business hours, get in touch with somebody who will walk you through specific features if you're having a tough time understanding how to implement something. I know when they went from the classic to the storyboard switch, they had somebody that was actually familiar with editing, walking me through how to do specific things that, I just couldn't do in their new version anymore. Now, the reason I highlight that, and I also highlight that they've made improvements to their storyboard version, is because you want a software that is actually constantly improving and debugging and improving the user experience based on what you need and what's actually effective in your workflow. So I really appreciate that about Descript. In the storyboard version of Descript, there are so many different features that you can actually take advantage of, which we are not going to have time to go over in today's video. But if you have any specific questions, make sure to drop them in the comments. One of the things that we didn't go over that you can do, for example, is export out just the transcript of what this came up with. So make sure to mess around and explore with these features. If you hit publish, you hit export, and in the export section, you actually hit transcript. Now you've got a Microsoft doc that you can actually export. Boom. And now I can go through that, and maybe I can pull some tweets or use it to write a description. So there are many ways where Descript can actually fit into your workflow and be productive. In terms of pricing at the moment, for a lot of hours that I don't really notice, about $29 or $30 per month, I believe, is what it's at. Premiere Pro is at like $20 to $22 per month, I believe. Or if you have the full suite, it's like $65 a month. So if you want to download Descript and you want to give it a shot, make sure you check out the link in the description below. It's my affiliate link, so when you sign up through that, it gives me a couple dollars, which is always nice. But I really do think this is a cool software. You can cancel it at any time, which is pretty awesome. And again, I think I'm going to be doing a lot more other videos, if you found this useful, on specific features and elements that are a little bit more straight to the point, and allow you to learn some of those effects very quickly. So if you have any specific requests or comments, make sure to drop them below. But thanks so much for hanging out. Make sure to subscribe if you like this video and you want to see more, and I'll hang out with you next time.